Hi everyone, and welcome back to my channel, or welcome to my channel if you are new. Today I am going to be doing my July wrap-up. I have not filmed a sit-down video in a hot second, so I feel kind of out of practice doing this, but hopefully this video will go okay. So let's just jump into the first book that I read in July. Actually, the first book that I listened to, because it was an audiobook, and that was Becoming by Michelle Obama. Can I just say, Michelle Obama has got a lovely voice. I usually listen to audiobooks when I'm going to bed, so hearing her read me to sleep every night was just a grand experience. But besides that, I did really like this book a lot more than I thought I was going to. I don't really like to read about politics, and I wasn't really sure how political this book would be, like even fictional politics. I just don't care to read about it. So I was pleasantly surprised that this book wasn't super political at all, and it was just about her life. And I actually found it extremely interesting, the parts when she talked about living in the White House, because I was always really curious just to know what that was like, especially like when I was a kid. I always think about what it would have been like to grow up in that environment and going to school and stuff like that. It was really interesting getting a look into that kind of life. And also at the beginning of this book, she brought up something that had just never crossed my mind before, and I don't know why, but she talked about how now that they've moved out of the White House that she has like neighbors and neighbor dogs, and I was like, how has that never crossed my mind that once the presidency is over, the family moves out of the White House into just like a normal house, and that they have neighbors, and there's like somebody out there that can say that their neighbors are the Obamas. I don't know why that just never crossed my mind before, and I just assumed that all presidents just lived in the White House until they like died, but that was just something that never crossed my mind, and I found it very, very interesting. So yeah, I would recommend this book. I thought it was good. The next book I picked up was another audiobook, and that is Call Me By Your Name by Andre Aciman. I'm not 100% sure how to pronounce it, but this was a great book. I loved this so much. It is a love story at its finest. It is set in the 80s in Italy, and we're following Elio, or Elio, it's another name I'm not really sure exactly how to pronounce, but he lives with his parents in Italy, and every year his parents, they like take in a student. I honestly, I was so invested in everything else about the story that I kind of missed the details of this part about like why it is and who it is that they actually take in to live with them every year, but it's like a student that is maybe doing like an internship or something in Italy. I'm a little fuzzy on that part of the story, but this year they take in Oliver, and this is basically the story of Oliver and Elio's relationship, and it is just marvelous. I super loved the writing, which totally came across in the audiobook. Sometimes I feel like you can't really judge writing based off of an audiobook, but I feel like it really came through in this one, and it was just so, so good. This is the kind of story that just hits you with all of the feels. Like, it's such a lovely story, and then at the same time it's like really heartbreaking, but then it leaves you with like such a hopeful feeling, but then it's also kind of sad. It gives you all of the emotions, and I just absolutely loved it. I really want to reread this book and read the physical copy, because I think I'll even get more out of the writing, because listening to it was already such an experience, but I think reading it physically will be even more of that experience, if that even makes any sense. But yeah, I just love this book. The only maybe issue that I have with it, which is just specifically for the audiobook, is the fact that Armie Hammer narrates it, which he's just a terrific narrator, I gotta tell you. I love his voice also. But he didn't really change the voices when it came to Elio and Oliver, and so sometimes I got a little bit confused as to who was talking. And also, Elio had these conversations a lot where he would imagine conversations between him and Oliver in his head, but they weren't actually happening. So if I wasn't fully paying attention, I would sometimes get confused as to whether this was a conversation that was actually happening, or this was just a conversation that Elio was having and imagining in his head. But other than that, I really loved this book. I could go on and on and on, but I'm gonna stop here, otherwise we'll be here for many years. The next book that I picked up in July was The Song of Achilles by Madeline Miller, and this is another book that I absolutely adored. 5 out of 5 stars. This is basically the story of Patroclus and Achilles. It's told from the point of view of Patroclus from basically when he's born through the Trojan War, and I just loved the story. I loved the characters. I loved the writing. I filmed filmed the 2 days that I read this book and Call Me By Your Name in a reading vlog, so if you want to learn more about my thoughts on this book or like hear my thoughts as I'm reading it, I'll leave a link to that reading vlog up in the card in the corner. But yeah, I could gush about this book for ages. In that vlog, I mentioned that the last 2 paragraphs of this book just hit you with all of the feels, and if I was a book crier like I am a movie crier, I would have been bawling my eyes out at the last 2 paragraphs of this book because it's just so filled with emotion that I love. And if this was ever turned into a film, you better believe that I'll just be like weeping in the movie theater, because I will see it in the theater. I also don't know if it was because I read this and Call Me By Your Name simultaneously, but I felt like I saw some like parallels between the characters in both of these books. Like Elio really felt like a Patroclus kind of character, and Oliver felt like Achilles. So dare I say I would love Timothée Chalamet to play Patroclus and Armie Hammer to play Achilles in the adaptation of this book. I'm just gonna put that out there into the universe. And yeah, again, I could talk about this for ages, so I'm just gonna stop here and move on to the next book that I read, which was Milk and Honey. This is a poetry collection, and I'm not really a poetry person, so I feel like I can't really speak or review this book because I just haven't read enough poetry to really know how to review it properly. So I liked this book. I didn't love it, but I also didn't hate it. It was just kind of okay. I definitely didn't expect this book. I guess I didn't really know what the poetry was about, so I did not expect it to be as heavy as it was. Trigger warning for sexual assault and rape, I believe. I read this at the beginning of the month, so I honestly can't remember a whole lot. It wasn't a super memorable book for me, but I do know that it dealt with some heavier topics that I wasn't expecting, so yeah, anyways, it was fine. It's just not, I don't think it's my kind of poetry. I don't even know if I'm a poetry person at all, so I should probably just maybe take a break from that for now. The next book I read in July was another audiobook, and that is Homework by Julie Andrews. This is her second memoir. I read her first one last month, which was Home, and that was from when she was a little girl up until filming Mary Poppins, and then this book picks up where that one left off, from filming Mary Poppins up until, I want to say, the 80s or the 90s, and I just loved this also. Again, Julie Andrews has such a lovely voice, so hearing her read me to bed every single night was just a grand experience, and I would recommend it to everybody. I really hope that she writes a third novel picking up where this left off, and a fourth, and a fifth. I then listened to another audiobook. I guess July was just the month of audiobooks, so I listened to Beautiful Boy by David Sheff. This is a nonfiction book. David Sheff is a father, and his son went through a really horrible drug addiction, and his son Nick Sheff also did write a couple of books about this, but I specifically wanted to read this one because I think this is the one that the movie is based off of, which is also called Beautiful Boy. This is one of those books that, just like any other like memoir that's based off of somebody's life, it's really hard to like review it because you can't review somebody's life, but I will say that I thought this book was super well done. Like, obvious trigger warnings for drug abuse, but if you're okay with that, I would totally recommend the book and the film because I think both of them are just so well done. The book is really well written, and I would recommend the audiobook because I thought the narrator did really well reading this book also. So yeah, I can't really talk a lot on it. Like, it's so hard to describe my thoughts on this book because it's not something that you can really like or enjoy, but it was just really well done. It really moved me, so I would recommend it, is really all that I can say. I then read A New Hope, The Princess, the Scoundrel, and the Farm Boy by Alexandra Bracken. This is basically a novelization of the film, but it's told in 3 parts. The first part we're following Princess Leia, the second part we're following Han Solo, and the third part we're following Luke Skywalker, and I did enjoy this. It's, you know, it wasn't anything too amazing. It's kind of written in a middle grade format, so the font is very big, there's some illustrations, and it's just, the writing is very simple. So the only thing I could really say about this book, like, it was fine. There were some parts that were, like, fictionalized, I guess, that weren't in the film, so she just, you know, wrote them for this book, but the parts that were in the film were word for word for the movie, which I do really appreciate. I don't like when there's novelizations of things and the authors, like, go off the grid with the dialogue or anything like that, so I appreciated that it was word for word, but I don't think I liked this book enough to continue on with the series, just because I think I would rather read new Star Wars stories that aren't films. I would definitely say that if you're not familiar with the film, then I would not recommend reading this book. Because of the way that it's told, there are parts of the film that aren't in this book, and there's just like whole parts that are missing. So if you're not familiar with the story, then I think you'd be very confused by this book. There are actually two parts of the story that I really appreciated though, and one was a part where Han Solo acknowledges the fact that Chewbacca is married, which if anybody's ever seen the Star Wars Christmas special, leave me a comment down below, because that was just both the worst thing and the best thing ever. But I appreciated that they mentioned that part. And then there was another part that I just spent like 10 minutes, you're not gonna see it because I'm gonna cut it out obviously, but I just spent 10 minutes trying to find this part because I thought it was so clever, and I don't even know if the author meant to do this or not, but there's a part where Princess Leia is talking to Darth Vader and she says something about sand, and just, I can't remember the line exactly, and I'm so frustrated that I can't find it in here, but it was something having to do with sand. And if you know the Anakin sand thing, then it's just a part to really be appreciated in this book, and I didn't want it to go unnoticed in my review of this. So yeah. That's how I feel about this book. I liked it, but not enough to continue with the series. And then the final book that I read in July was actually a reread for me, and that is A Walk to Remember by Nicholas Sparks. This I read originally in 2018, and I actually didn't really like this the first time that I read it because I wasn't really a romance person back then, especially this kind, which is very like slow burn and just like a sweet, sweet story. So I remember this book just absolutely bored me the first time that I read it, but then I absolutely bawled my eyes out at the end of this book. So I gave it 4 stars, because if a book can give me that kind of emotion, I think it deserves a high rating. This time around, however, I think either because I just enjoy romance more or because I was already familiar with the story and the characters, I actually enjoyed the entire thing. I didn't feel bored at all, and I just absolutely loved the story. So I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. I had 2 5-star reads this month, which is pretty good because I've only read like maybe 7 5-star books this year altogether, which I guess is kind of a lot. Depends on how you hand out 5-star reads. Anyways, so I really enjoyed this the second time reading it. I also now realize how important rereads are, because there is a important part of this story that I just did not realize the first time I read it, and that's the fact that this book is set in the 50s. I did not know the first time I read this book that it's set in the 50s because it says it on the back, but I don't ever read the backs of books. You'll know this if you've ever seen any of my book hauls, but yeah, so I had no idea, and there's like a couple times in the book where it does acknowledge the fact that it's set in the 50s, and I must have just skimmed over those parts because I really had no idea. I also think because I was focusing too much on the cover, and these are obviously like not 50s outfits. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure this is not from the 50s. So yeah, that was a very interesting part to realize that this was set in the 50s, which may also be why I loved it even more, because I do enjoy the 50s. Anyways, yeah, those are all of the books that I read in July. Like I said, I haven't filmed a sit-down video in a really long time, so I'm sorry if this was kind of rambly and all over the place and a little bit awkward. I hope you all enjoyed it anyway. If you've read any of these books, leave me a comment down below and let me know what you thought of them. I'd love to discuss them with you in the comments. I hope you all enjoyed this video. If you did, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you in my next one. Bye!
You hear that, Samson?